get started. If anybody else joins, we're going to be starting somewhat slowly. So I'm going to start out by saying that I'm in VS Code right now, and I'm using an extension called Jupyter Notebook. So if you've ever used Google Collaboratory, people are, okay, this is going to be difficult for me to multitask. People are trying to use the bot. Anyway, if you've ever used Google Collaboratory, it works basically the same way, but it's just separating my code into blocks with text in the middle. So we're going to be talking today and for the next at least one more week about classes, and not like school classes, but classes as a coding concept. The idea behind a class is that it is a type of object you can use in your code, and that's where the term object-oriented programming comes from, also known as OOP. It's where you use these objects, and I'll talk a little bit more about what they're used for in a bit. But I personally really like coding this way. You don't have to use classes. Like using just functions and loops works fine, but the main purpose of a class is to do two things. I'm not mute. Okay. It groups together pieces of data into one place, and it groups together functions into one place. So a class is told to Python by using the keyword class and then a name. So class student. And this works. It's kind of similar to how functions work. So you have, oh, it doesn't work like that. You have define my function. The only difference is that you don't put parentheses. So it doesn't need the parentheses. And then in here, inside of the class, indented, you put whatever you want to be encapsulated inside of the object. So say, like, what pieces of information are important for a student to have? Well, their age, I guess. I'll set that. I'll set it to 0 and then define it later. And this is not. Maybe I shouldn't be doing it like this. Okay, so this is not the way that you actually want to do it generally, but this works and is a little bit simpler. So this is the way I'm going to be doing it for now. But age is 0, name, empty string, and I'm going to put in there a function as well. Define go to school to be a function that takes no parameters and reduces the happiness by 1. Okay. So we're talking about classes today. So I'm using student as an example, and I will show you in a minute how this is implemented. You can also start reading down here if you're interested, but so now we have this object, a student, with some values inside of it and a function. So now down here, I can say a class is basically an object, Avril. It's interchangeable.
There's a slight difference I'll just mention, guys. So a class is when we call it a class when we're defining the type of like type we want to make. So that's what class is, and an object is when we like create a variable that is of the type student. If you guys
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
know.
So
And
it's almost like it's a class of objects.
yeah,
So just as like you could say that, in fact, this is a perfect example. When you say student, that's a class because you're not referring to one specific thing. But when you say Kevin is a student, then now Kevin's the object and student is the class. And when you put the parentheses, that tells Python that you are, oh, interesting. 1 second.
yeah, but with if you guys didn't know, like the reason why we use classes is to make our code more organized so that we can group together pieces of data. For example, just like we mentioned, the student. A student might have different properties that we might want to manage and group together and manipulate. For example, they have their age, their 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 room number, their courses, their grade, those type of things. So it's just object-oriented programming is a very easy way to create systems for program.
Yeah, so in this case, I've made an instance. We say that this is an instance of the class student inside of the variable Kevin. So I'm going to print Kevin's happiness is, and then I say Kevin dot happiness in order to access the things inside of the object. And then I will say Kevin dot go to school. Oh yes, that reminds me. Yeah. So yeah, so whenever you, this is my bad, I forgot about this. Whenever you do Kevin dot happiness, whenever you access or Kevin dot go to school, whenever you access something inside of the object, if it's a method, Python will automatically pass basically Kevin into the method. So we need at least one variable inside of every method of the class because Python will be automatically passing in the object. So the default term for this is self, but I could call this anything other than student, really. I could call it Kevin. I could call it that'd be a bad variable name. But we always, like, self is generally used to be self is generally used to be the name of the variable here. It's
Yeah,
just sort of
and we'll be getting
default.
into why you need self and why that's a necessary variable once we cover the differences
Oh yeah.
between class level variables and object level variables, or we call
Mhm.
them parameters, I believe. But yeah,
Mhm. So this is a very basic example, and I've got a self dot happiness. So Python automatically highlights self because it's used commonly. It's part of its PEP something, I'm sure. Anyway, so this is first example. I'm gonna go on to another. Actually, this one's kind of redundant now that I look at it. This is basically the same thing. Oh, yeah, okay. So now this whole thing where we defined it as 0, and then if we wanted to make it not 0, we would have to do Kevin.age equals Kevin, how old are you?
I'm 17.
17, okay.
Yeah.
We'd have to set it in 2 different lines, and that's a little awkward. So instead, the way that's much more commonly used is we use this function called underscore underscore init underscore underscore. And this is one of several special built-in methods in Python that is handled a little bit differently when it's inside of a class. So what the init function will do is anything that you pass into it will come from when you're creating the object. So here, I'm making a dog. Dog1 is equal to a dog with age 10 and breed German Shepherd. So I'm passing in self, which is automatically passed in by Python, the age, which is here, and then the breed, which is here. And then inside of it, this is a little bit, I can see how this would be a little bit confusing, but basically what I'm doing is assigning these values that we passed in to class variables so that later I can pull out our the breed, in this case, our dog.breed, in order to pull out this parameter here. So when I run this, the dogs we have are German Shepherd, Golden Retriever, and Poodle.
I'm just gonna interject, but as you can see, when we define self.age and self.breed, this is an example of a object instance variable, a variable for a class for an object. So each object that we define is going to have its own unique object instant variables. And in our previous example, those are class instance variables, I believe.
So each one of these dogs is a different class instance, and it's got its own unique variables. So dog as a class stores no information other than this code. All of the information is stored inside of these objects. So now I've got nothing that's happening here is anything that couldn't be done with lists and loops. And that's actually how you do it, or how Mr. Chapman teaches you to do it in grade 11. For the array assignment, for example, you do everything using lists. And it, as those of you who have done that know, it gets annoying. Doesn't it initialize? It allows you, yeah. So another thing that you could have instead used classes to group all of that information together. And in this example here, it's a little bit long, but I will go through it. I'm making sort of it's an extremely simple game, but it shows off some of the neat things that classes can do. So I'm starting out by just defining a general class for an NPC. It's got a strength and a name, pretty simple. One thing that is interesting to note here is that you can set any class instance variable inside of the init function. In this case, I'm setting health points, HP, inside of init. And that was not passed in, but I'm creating it from this. Now, if I wanted something that's true for all NPCs, I could have defined it out here, something like type. Whoa, no, I can't do that. I'll just say like species equals NPC. So then this will be true for every instance of this will be true for every instance of the class, but I didn't need to do that for this example, so I didn't. Now I've got two methods in here, both of them taking self. I've got action, self, and is dead. So the first one is just a simple, if it has more than, I don't know why I did it like this, but it's just a decision. If it's really low in health, it will, yeah. If it's got more than a third health, it'll attack. Otherwise, it'll run. And then I've got another one which is even simpler, and I think there's an easier way to do this, but I forget what it is in Python. So I just did it using a method where it'll return whether or not it's dead. And then I'm creating an instance into Dragon. And then I've got, oh, let me actually stop scrolling. That might be hard for you guys to read. And then I've got a health for the user, the player. And then a while loop and some game logic that it shouldn't be too unfamiliar to you. Maybe, yeah. Hopefully nothing in here is too difficult. So I'm doing dragon.is dead as part of checking whether or not I should continue looping. Pulling out the numbers in order to print to the user. And then, oh yes, I can directly change values inside of, yeah, I can post it after we're done. I don't know if you can open this kind of file with, I may have to, I'll convert it to a REPL and then I'll post it. That'll probably work best. Oh yeah, I think REPL is probably just the easiest way to do it. Anyway, and then I've got, I'll show an example of it running. Oh, so my least favorite thing about this, like everything works great, except for some reason the input, it goes to the top of the screen. So this is a very easy game to win. You just keep attacking. There's no strategy. Has 40 health remaining, did 20 damage, got hit. I will attack again. And then I killed it. Or I can just delay the inevitable by running. And this is obviously a very primitive example, but you can add quite a bit to a game like this. You can flesh out the enemy interactions, you can add a story, you can add more strategy, you can add randomness. There's so much you can. Okay, so now I'm going to do, I obviously kind of cheated, coded most of these in advance. I'm going to do a live demo of just another application of classes. So next week, I'm going to be teaching again, and we're going to go a bit more in depth into some of the edge cases you can do with classes, some of the special functions, some of the special things. But for now, just going to vanilla and flesh out the student idea a little bit more. So we've got a class student, and every student here has school of SJAM and favorite club of CS Club, obviously. And I'll make a also, this is interactive, so if you have any suggestions, I would appreciate it if you put them in the lesson room. Anyway, adding an init function, just some basic things like age, name, homeroom, grades. Sure. And then just
as Kegan is typing, as we can see here, an example of a class instant variable that's shared by all objects that we create is school and favorite club. So I see you guys are all from SJAM. You guys are all all have your favorite club, SCS club, right? And then, as you can see, Kegan is now typing self.age, self.name, self.homeroom, self.grades. These are called object instant variables. So these have to be defined when we create the object. So I'm just clarifying this so you guys understand what it means when I say class instance a variable. We don't actually call these variables if they're in a class. We call these parameters or fields. So class instance fields are examples of school and favorite club, and object instance fields are age, name, homeroom, and grades. And the difference is that school favorite club is initialized as SJAM and CS club for any object we create, and we can change them later, of course. But typically, again, never mind. And then we have object instance variables like age, name, homeroom, and grades, just to make sure that you guys are clear about what the different types of variables.
Sorry, I'm just looking up to see if there's an okay, there is.
And
So I'm
then
gonna do
another thing now that Kegan's typing right now is average grades. This is an example of a method that we have on our class. Classes can have different methods that are basically functions that do something. They either modify the internal variables of our student or return something. As you can see, average grades, this returns the value so we can see what the average grades of a student is. What does self mean? Self, it refers to the object when we initialize it. It refers to the object itself. So for example, self.age is the object's variable age. But the class can have school and favorite club just already initialized. It's all shared between every single object we create.
So one thing, I don't know if I can do this or not, but one thing that I'm doing here is this one does not actually take in self. So because I don't take in self, I don't need to specify from within the class that it is like self.average grades or anything like that. I can just run average grades because this is just a function inside the class. And it's there because average grades is only something that I want to do in my program inside of the student class. If, let's say, outside of the class, I want to use this average function, I can do student dot average grades. And when I do class dot method, it doesn't pass in any kind of self because there's no object to pass in. So that's a good example there. And then I also made a method for taking a test where you just pass in the score and then it adds that to, and then I need to do, it adds that to your list of grades and then it calculates a new average grade. So I can now do something like take in some information. So make an array of students. And then for age equals and then and I'm not going to be passing in like all of this stuff is just up to you. Obviously. Oh, somebody texted me. Okay. obviously all of this is up to the specific problem that you're trying to solve, but I'm not going to be passing in any kind of grades when I start it. And the way that we do that, I don't know if you guys talked about this in reference to functions, but I can do this. I can say grades is equal to an empty list. So, and I don't know if this will throw an error if I try to do that, but probably won't. That'd be weird. Anyway, this way, if I don't specify what grades is, then it'll default to being an empty list. So I will do students dot append student age name homeroom, and then now we'll just do a little bit of data analysis and go for S in student. Uh, I think I need, oh yeah, I can do s dot average. Oh, and then over here I have to do this a little bit differently. So this wasn't working because I didn't actually have a way to pull the average from the student because it never updates. So there we go. And then grades plus equals s dot average and then of course this isn't going to do anything, so I'll just have each one of them take a test, I guess. So here's something quite nice that I should point out is that you don't, if you've got all of them in an array, you can just do students -1 dot take test, and you don't need to like pull it out, set it to a variable, anything like that. This just takes the place. And then also these for loops save a lot of time. If you're doing Python, you should probably be using them. Okay, and I think that should be about it. Let me try running it. Okay, student number 1, age 16, name, and homeroom 1, 2, 3, 4, test grade 90. What do you mean? Okay, so I guess I do have to do student. I didn't think I had to do that. Okay, but that's my bad. Okay, so the problem here, I thought you could do that, but you can't. Age, same thing. Bruh. What? Oh. Okay. Art error is fun. Let me fix this as quickly as I can. I'll turn on. Why is this still showing? What the? Okay, I don't know why those are yellow still. Anyway, let's move past that. If sum of grades is equal to 0, this should fix it. Oh, not age. Okay, so after putting in some data, it says he has an average grade of this. I thought I put 94. Okay, anyway, the point is that I'm gonna wrap this up because this is kind of dragging on a little bit. But and I'll fix whatever's wrong with this before uploading the code. But you can use classes to store these kinds of separate objects that each need to have their own sets of data. And it's just so much better than having multi-dimensional arrays where like each array is a set of information that each, yeah, it just gets, it's so much nicer to pack it up. So